Welcome to everyone from across the planet to the 2020 Just for Laughs Festival, presented by La Capitale Insurance and Financial Services in collaboration with Lotto Quebec.
JFL has certainly missed being able to see you in Montreal and Toronto this year, but are incredibly excited to present to you their first ever digital festival.
Over the span of this edition, you'll be able to enjoy a whole host of different programming split across 3 virtual rooms and featuring over 100 artists.
Excitingly this year, Kevin Hart's global comedy brand LOL has come on board as the official programming partner of the festival to curate an amazing lineup in their very own comedy room.
Across the entire festival, you'll be able to tune in to a mix of in-conversation and live stand-up performances from top-tier talent and emerging comedians, virtual panel discussions, live podcast tapings, and more.
Plenty of chances to see some of the biggest names in comedy and to meet some of the stars of tomorrow.
The full festival program can be found by clicking schedule on the website. How chic.
Every room is jam-packed with fantastic shows. But don't worry if you can't decide between 2 things that are on at the same time, or if you live in a part of the world where you'd rather be sleeping at showtime, like me in Australia with my fern. All of the shows will be available on the video on demand service once they have been streamed live and can be watched until midnight Pacific time on Sunday night.
Part of the motivation for the festival this year is to help support the movement toward change. And we've invited artists to spotlight one of their favorite charities to help raise awareness and donations. Info on which charities the artists have chosen can be found below each show on the show page.
So, with all that said, we are ready to start the show. This is Just for Laughs 2020. I pulled something.
The following program may contain mature subject matter and coarse language. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by Just for Laughs. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey everyone, I'm your virtual host that wears a hat, Sabrina Jalees, and I'm here to thank you for attending and tuning in to our next show, the latest installment of Conversations with Funny People. I'm so excited for this conversation featuring Chelsea Handler, moderated by TV host, actor, director, and writer Nicole Stamp. Now, Chelsea has been honored by Time Magazine in their annual Time 100 edition. She's also one of Glamour Magazine's Women of the Year, and the Human Rights Campaign gave her its Ally for Equality Award. The show starts right now, so sit back, enjoy Conversations with Funny People featuring Chelsea Handler, presented by HBO Max.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? It is so great to be here tonight in my living room with my ficus. My name is Nicole Stamp. Thanks so much for that intro, virtual Sabrina Jalees. I am a TV host, actor, and director, and it is my pleasure tonight to talk to an incredible person who is successful and prolific across every possible kind of media. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we get started because she is just mwah. So she's one of the most successful figures in entertainment today. She's a comedian. She's an activist. She's been a #1 New York Times bestselling author 5 times in a row. Her talk shows, her podcast, and of course her stand-up comedy have earned her millions of fans across the world. She first rose to prominence hosting E's top-rated Chelsea Lately, which ran for 7 years. And following that groundbreaking show, she launched the Netflix comedy talk show Chelsea, where she traveled around the world doing thought-provoking and hilarious pranks and conversations. She then created the doc series Chelsea Does, exploring topics from marriage to racism to drugs. And as an activist, she's worked with Emily's List, helping to elect more women to public office, yes, to campaign for feminist candidates, and so importantly, to help people register to vote. Whew. She also works with the Karam Foundation, a nonprofit that funds sustainable development projects initiated by Syrian people for Syrian people. And her best-selling books include Life Will Be the Death of Me, Are You There, Vodka? It's Me, Chelsea, You Got to Be Kidding Me, My Horizontal Life, Chelsea Bang Bang, and Lies That Chelsea Handler Told Me. I am talking, of course, about Chelsea Handler. Now, her new special, Evolution, is going to premiere on HBO Max on October 22nd, and I had a chance to watch a preview of it, and it is just so good. It's so good. So before we call her up on screen for this conversation with a very funny person, I would love to show you this exclusive sneak peek of a clip from her latest comedy series, Evolution.
A lot of people depend on me because I'm kind of like a pharmacological intuit. Like I could look at you and say, okay, you're going to thrive on this drug. You're going to do better on Xanax. You might prefer a Vicodin. You might like an Adderall. Like I can tell by looking at your body and talking to you for 5 minutes what drug you are going to respond to. Don't talk to me about melatonin either, people, okay? Melatonin is for beginners. Talk to me after you've taken an Ambien and woken up at a Harrah's blackjack table, $500 up with your eye shades on. Then you can talk to me about fucking melatonin. So a lot of people know this about me. Like my sister, she had trouble making speeches at work because she would get dry mouth. So I prescribed her propranolol. That's a beta blocker. I said, take one 30 minutes before you speak publicly. She's been promoted twice. She called me, she's like, thank God we have a doctor in the family. Magnesium 07 by Aerobic Life for women who have trouble going to the bathroom. A lot of women have trouble going to the bathroom every day. If you take 3 of those every night for 3 nights, you would have solid shadoobies for the rest of your life. If you take 4, you will get diarrhea. Some girls like that. If you do take 4, you'll get it. Doxycycline will kill anything in your system. I mean, acne, malaria. 2 doxycycline twice a day for 10 days, never on an empty stomach, you'll vomit, okay? It will knock anything out of your system. I take 1 every morning just not to fuck around.
My mic was muted. Welcome to the modern age where people's mics get muted and they just do interpretive mime shows. Hopefully you could lip read. What I was saying was this special is so funny. It's funny the way that you expect Chelsea Handler to be funny, but I have to say, as someone who's familiar with her work, I feel like in this special you see a different side of her that I have never seen before. It's always honest, but this time there's also a raw and more intimate and more personal side of her that comes out. It is just beautiful, and I am so excited to talk to her tonight. Please join me in welcoming to the screen Chelsea Handler.
What's up?
Hey! How's it going?
Hi. It's so nice to see you. It's going well as it can be going, right?
Yeah. There's a lot going on. Like, what do you even make of this insane time in history? How are you doing?
I mean, it's a shit show. It is. I think everyone, first of all, everyone is at the end of their fucking rope with COVID. Like everyone feels they're so done. You know, people who are suffering financially are done, and people who aren't suffering financial are done because of the suffocation, you know, that it embeds in you. Like you just can't feel, we can't go to any countries to get away from this. And then with the election coming up and that shit show, and, you know, and a governor about to get kidnapped in one of our states, it's like, thanks a lot, Facebook. I mean, the whole thing is so aggravating. And so I just, you know, I'm hoping for the best. I want to be optimistic, but I definitely am in a mood now. Like, I want this election to be over, and I want Donald Trump to have his hairpiece removed, fly off into the Rose Garden as he's dragged out in his underpants, out of the White House in handcuffs, on his ankles too.
I feel like you're talking dirty to me. That gave me feelings that I didn't know I could have in this time. I mean, I'm distracted because your dog just walked by. Can you tell us about your dog? Just because everyone.
Oh no, that's a stuffed animal.
No, what drug did I take?
I didn't even. Birdie, come here. I didn't even see him. That's so funny. I was like, I don't have a dog here. What are you talking about? They're outside in their cages. So, hi, Birdie.
They belong.
That's right. That's one half of my 2 dog. They're a couplet. They were from the same litter. One is named Bertrand, and one is named Bernice. And so when I went to rescue them, she was like, oh, I said, listen, I like anything that has a chow mix. And she's like, okay, well, we have 2. She goes, I have a brother and sister combo. She's like, let me go get them. And they came around the corner. And the first time I saw Bert's body, I was like, oh my God. And then she said their names are Bert, Trand, and Bernice. And I literally like turned around, looked up at the sky, and almost climaxed. I'm like, that's exactly what I would have named them.
Really? That's
Yes.
amazing.
Bert
I
and
love that
Bernice
story.
are funny names for dogs, so I was
They
into it
are.
big time.
I met a dog name once named Lorna, and I just thought that was like cool. Lorna.
Yeah, I like
Just
regular
secretary.
names for dogs for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, I want to know how you've been doing during the pandemic. Have you been holed up in your compound? Like, what are you doing? Are you baking sourdough bread?
No, I'm not baking
No.
anything.
No,
I
you're
mean,
not.
I'm baking cocktails is what I'm doing.
Ayo.
The first 2 weeks I treated it like spring break, like because we didn't know how long it was, how interminable it was going to be. So the first 2 weeks I was like, I guess I'll wake up and take, a mushroom capsule or an edible. Like I rotated all my drugs and cannabis and capsule form and edible form. And I was like, this is a good time for experimentation. And then after 2 weeks, I was like, this is going on for a long time. So then I had to get my act together because, of course, then you have to Zoom and start acting professionally. And it was really important for me to try and shoot this special, like to do not just this special, but to do something during COVID that made me feel like I was exercising my brain. You know what I mean? Other than reading books. So it became important. It became an important goal of mine to accomplish this during COVID.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I feel like everybody had all these sort of like high hopes of becoming really productive during the pandemic. And then what we all really did was like drink too much wine and watch a lot of television
and finger blast yourself. Yeah, exactly. But I did get very productive. I mean, in terms of reading, like obviously I know a lot of people are in the same boat. I got those books off my shelf that I wasn't ever going to read before. And I was like, well, now you have no excuse. And then I got really healthy because I'm like, well, there's no excuse now. You know what I mean? You can't
You
really
got healthy
socialize.
during the pandemic? What the hell?
Yeah.
Of all the rest of us
Yeah.
just ate cheesies.
Well,
All
that's
right,
what I kept hearing. When I hear people go in one direction, I always want to go in the opposite. So as soon as everybody put on their freshman 15, I'm like, I'm going in the opposite direction.
Oh, that's amazing. So what did you think of, like, what are you making of the Black Lives Matter movement? Like, I feel like this year has basically been like, it seemed normal, pandemic, Black Lives Matter, weird summer, second wave stuff. So like, I feel like, okay, in the Black Lives Matter part of the summer, what did you feel?
Well, it felt like, I finally, we all felt, well, not we all, but the majority of people felt like there was a purpose. That was like the first time I went out was to protest. And, it made you, I've been doing this, I've been reassessing my own kind of place in the world, for since I started seeing a therapist, and that's what, my book was about. And then I made a stand-up special about it. But I realized this about 4 years ago when I made my documentary, the Hello Privilege, It's Me, Chelsea, because I realized, oh my God, my privilege in this world, you think you get to places because you're talented and you've got this great personality. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, white has a lot to do with it. And I remember coming up against these conversations with people during the filming of that and beforehand with people when I would bring this subject up to other white people, the defensiveness and we weren't here during slavery. Like, this isn't our fault. We didn't do it. And it's like, you're looking at a microcosm. You're not looking at the big picture of the impact that this has all had on Black people since the beginning of our country. The Declaration of Independence was written at a time when we had 200,000 slaves and we're banging on to England about our freedom. It's so systemic that once I came to grips with that for my personal self, I had to do a film about it and then, and have uncomfortable conversations, which, anyone who's familiar with me knows that I am drawn to that. I like a discomfort. I think that's the way to get to a real conversation. So the movement has been a great reminder that change needs to happen, that we have to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for very obvious reasons, because we have a real white supremacy problem in this country. And I loved it. I mean, I've read so many books since that. I've loved being a part of something that I know a lot about. I like to get educated on a topic and then spread that information to the people who are interested in hearing what I have to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned like uncomfortable conversations, and I feel like it's really clear from your work that is something you gravitate towards. Why are you different than everybody else? Because everybody else hates uncomfortable conversations. Like what makes you have a different approach to that?
I'm just pissed. I'm pissed at the way that white people have behaved. I'm pissed at the privilege of being able to say, I don't see racism. I don't know what you're talking about. That's a privilege that you don't see racism. You're not looking for racism if you're white. You're not looking for someone to be marginalized on a line in Starbucks because when you're white, you're just not open to that. You're thinking about your perspective and your life. And my whole therapy excursion, I should probably say something more respectful about therapy than calling it an excursion, but that's what it felt like, was like, oh, stop thinking about you. Start thinking about the people that do not look like you and think about how their lives are. You know, like you have the luxury of thinking about other people, and what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? It's not one thing. It's a kind of mission, you know, and it's something that like, I feel very well versed in because I have had these uncomfortable conversations. But a great example was, I was over at my girlfriend's house the other night. We do this Friday night outdoor dinner at my friend's house. And when this happened with George Floyd and the protests were beginning again, she had just read that book by Robin DiAngelo. What is it called? White Fragility.
Yeah.
And she was talking to me and she goes, we just had a live Zoom with, you know, all the people of color who work in my office. And she was like, I just can't believe how they felt this whole time and that they haven't been able to like tell us or, you know, relay this to us. And she started crying. And I was like, what are you doing? I go, this is what that fucking book is about, to not cry over your white fragility because you've just discovered that you haven't created the nicest workplace for people of color. Like, it's not about you. It's about, okay, I fucked up. Now what am I going to do to create solution? And she was like, but I'm telling you. And I go, but don't tell me. This is the problem. White people bitching about all of this shit. We have to stop bitching about something that we think is taking from us. You know, we're supposed to, if you feel so bad, dive in towards solution and how you're going to make an impact and make change for people of color in this country, because it's enough already.
Yeah. I always feel like unless money or power are changing hands, it's just a therapy session. Otherwise it's not helping anybody, right? You know, it feels like it's a self-improvement project to care about racism if you're not actually moving money or moving power to different people, getting people different jobs, getting people different positions,
absolutely.
right? Like something has to change. And if it's not changing, then it's just a performance.
It is just a performance, but also more importantly, you know, like we have a whole platform, Facebook, that just spreads disinformation, you know, just spreads these crazy, you know, conspiracy theories about, you know, the Clintons owning some, you know, sex trafficking ring in a pizza parlor, the pizza parlor in the basement, out of the basement of a pizza parlor. Meanwhile, the pizza parlor that they mentioned doesn't even have a fucking basement. That's how like thin these conspiracies are. And they spread them throughout Facebook. So you rile up these people that feel disenfranchised because Black people might be doing well. And that means that they're not going to do, if Black people do well, then where are we? You know, these kinds of people. And so that's my mission is, you know, right now it's very Facebook oriented, to just stop spreading disinformation, stop it. The lies and the hateful white supremacy is a problem in this country. And it is every white person's duty to stand up and say no and call out injustices whenever we see them, wherever we are, whether it's public or private.
I'm cheersing you to that.
Well, I'll cheers to you. You look like you're drinking water.
Cheers.
I'm
drinking water. You're having vodka. I feel like we're both very on brand tonight.
Very on brand for me, yes.
So I want to talk about Evolution, your new special. You haven't done a special in 5 years.
6
years. To do this one, 6 years. You've come to do this one now, and you shoot it during a pandemic. So I have a lot of questions about the special, but first I just want to know the challenges of shooting a comedy special during a pandemic. It wasn't super clear from just the preview clip that we showed, but the special was all shot outdoors so that it was socially distanced and safe. Can you talk a little bit about what it took to shoot something during the pandemic like that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, it was like, you know, I was about to shoot the special before COVID, or I was about to go on tour and do like 20 shows and then shoot it. And then, you know, COVID happened and everything shut down. And I just thought, okay, like, I've got to figure out a way to do this. Like, there's got to be comedy coming out. Like, we can't just stop everything. And I I just thought, okay, New York, New Jersey, that sounds like they were doing better before we were. And then LA blew up. So it was around, May. And I said to my agents and my manager, I said, let's hire a director and let's figure out a way to make this happen. I don't care what the audience size is. The special is so personal and so for the time. I didn't want to wait till after the election. I thought it would be less relevant. It's not that it's, politically heavy, but it's morally heavy. And I just kind of said, let's figure this out. Let me go home to New Jersey to have like this kind of evolution, which it was for me. And we just had to, we did testing for the audience before the show. People had to quarantine. We did testing on site again. And then it was socially distanced. And if people wanted to wear masks, they were totally allowed to. And if they didn't, they were allowed to. So we followed all the rules and we pulled it off. And I have to tell you, it felt fucking awesome to pull this off during COVID. It was like, we had like 150 people, but I didn't care about the size of the crowd. I had something to say, it was a narrative. And when I not left stand up, but when I stopped doing stand up 6 years ago, I just felt like I had nothing to say. I was just like getting paid to tell jokes. And that wasn't enough for me anymore. Like I wanted to have something, a message or a narrative. So, all of those things were motivators.
That's amazing. Yeah. I love the location that you chose, the venue, Central Railroad of New Jersey Terminal. It's this beautiful outdoor sort of old train station from the 1800s. And it's amazing because when you turn around and shoot the audience, you can see the New York skyline in the background. And it's such a lovely location. Can you talk a bit about shooting in Jersey and what made you choose that spot?
Well, I wanted to go to my home state. I'm from New Jersey. And my director, Troy, found that spot, and it was obviously so beautiful. It just looks so elegant, Mm-hmm. And I was performing the whole time looking at the New York City skyline. I'm like, totally distracted. But it was a train station for immigrants that came from Ellis Island. So there was meaning behind it, which I was always more, now with the work that I put out, whether it's serious or whether it's stand up or whether it's anything in between, I want it to have a contribution and a meaning and to give instead of taking. That's my thing that I learned in therapy. It's like, you can go through this life just cashing checks and taking, but are you looking around to see what you're putting out there and how you're influencing people?
Yeah, I want to know more about therapy for you because you talk about it a lot. You've talked about it on different shows and on your podcast. It's all really compelling. And I know that you had a long journey of resistance before you embraced therapy as something that you were interested in pursuing. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I had a long journey of resistance towards, meditation and words like manifestation and gratitude, and all of that always kind of made my vagina clench. When people would talk like that, especially in LA, it's overdrive. So I'm from New Jersey, so it's really hard to kind of cozy up to those concepts when you're just like, please don't say manifest again. You know what I mean? But now I'm on the other side of it and I'm like, oh yeah, I can hear manifestation. I get it now. I was resistant to getting real. I was resistant to letting anyone see me to be anything other than what I had become, which was strong, and I'm strong and people think I'm tough. And I realized, I had resisted therapy so much because that involved me tearing that down. Mm-hmm. And being vulnerable and crying in front of a stranger, which, I can't tell you how many sessions we'd get onto the brink of something and I would just be like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. In your head, you're like, no, he's not going to get me to cry. Not going. And it's like, who the fuck are you fighting with? Yourself? Because you can't let someone see you cry. I mean, and he knew because he's a professional what he was dealing with. And he navigated it in a way that we didn't get to any of the deep stuff until my guard was a little bit down, Mm-hmm. I went in bitching about Donald Trump. I'm like, fucking Ivanka and their veneers. I'm like, I can't take it. I can't take fucking Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions, that little fucking Ku Klux Klan member. I mean, I would go in there and bitch about the administration for like the first 3 sessions for like an hour. And he would just sit there and be like, And then finally we got past that.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, using toughness as a defense mechanism, because I feel like on some level that has to partly be who you are. I mean, New Jersey has a reputation for being tough, and you're obviously a very intelligent person who really leads from the intellect. And so being tough in that way, like it's a really valid defense mechanism. But I think like it is also sort of who you are in many aspects of your personality. Another defense mechanism that I think is really interesting to talk about, which you talk about a lot in the special, is drug use. I love the idea that you can meet a person and you can tell them what drug. If I were to name some famous people, can you prescribe them the drug that you think they should be taking right now?
Sure. Try. Let's see.
Okay, Biden. What drug does Joe Biden need?
Biden doesn't need any. I mean, he just needs to be alert. Okay, we don't need to give him any drugs. Like, he doesn't need to be hallucinating. He doesn't need to be like doing ayahuasca and having it come to Jesus. We just need him to stay the course and win this election. And that's it. So I'm not prescribing him. I'm a responsible pharmaceutical representative.
Like, do you feel like Melania Trump needs a drug?
Yes, she needs every drug that's available because, first of all, after hearing that recording of hers the other day, I'm not as sympathetic to her, but I will have to say that being married to him could drive anyone to be a complete and utter cunt. So I think she could use ecstasy. She needs street drugs. No cocaine for her. No, that would go down a dark road. But ecstasy, Molly, I would say Xanax could help her, and cannabis, definitely cannabis, because that could chill her, take down the edge.
Right. What would you send to Trump himself?
A horse tranquilizer that killed him, like something that would make him not be able to speak for the next 4 weeks, or no, until we inaugurate Joe Biden. That would be good, but a horse tranquilizer would help. Yeah,
okay. Do you eat that, or do you put it in somewhere? Like, how do you take that drug?
I haven't taken one, but I think that he would like it.
All right. Yeah, I'll take that.
Well, we could shoot it intravenously. I think that's a ketamine therapy. That's what Donald Trump needs, is ketamine therapy.
Okay, nice. I hope someone from the White House is watching this special and is taking notes.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
They follow everything I do.
Yeah, right? They do. I mean, does he follow you on Twitter? Has he blocked you on Twitter, or does he?
Oh, no, he doesn't follow me on Twitter. I don't think. I mean,
I've never blocked you.
But I'm sure. Yeah, he probably did. I don't know, though.
Okay. I'm curious about that. I feel like he checks you because you talk about him in ways that I think affect a lot of people. I bet he looks at your Twitter.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's so many people that talk about him that way, though. Like, it's not just me. You know what I mean? So I'm sure that, maybe he does, but who cares what he does?
Yeah, no, it's true. So I'm interested in talking about some of the content of your special. And obviously, amid all the comedy, there's this segment where you get really real. And it's amazing, Chelsea. Like, you talk about the death of your brother, Chet, and your grief and your experience coming out of that and working on that in therapy. And it's so wonderful that you do that. I think there are so many people who have experienced loss, who feel so alone in that. And I think that you're somebody who are able to say to people, you're not alone. And I have these same feelings of vulnerability and pain. And I think it's really special that you share that. So thank you so much. And I'm so excited for all the people that will get to see it and benefit from what you're sharing. It's beautiful.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you, Nicole. I think that, my brother said something to me a couple of years ago, because I was like, I was going through this phase of insecurity and I just didn't know what I should do, or if I didn't want to do my shows anymore. I didn't want to do a talk show, but my identity was so, tied to that. And I was like, no, I have to make a leap. Like, I have to do things that are having more of an impact. And I want to, do them more sparingly. So I have the attention and the drive to really focus on things. And I remember my brother said to me, I was in Florida doing stand-up for my book tour. And he said, don't forget that people rely on you for like the truth of your experience. That's the thing that people respond to with you, because you always tell the truth about what you're going through. Like, don't worry about having a moment of seriousness in your stand-up routine, because the rest of it, I was like, oh, how do you do that? And it was my dream to knit together hysterical laughter with emotion, deep emotion. I wanted to do something deep. And when he said that, I was like, oh yeah, you just have to tell the truth, because that's something that isn't that common. People don't divulge everything personally. Celebrities certainly are a little bit more guarded. They don't divulge everything. They don't show you the real stuff, and they don't show you the grit or the pain or the ugly. And I am, down to do that to an extent, but I mean, I am down to do that. So it was a great reminder for my brother, who, obviously I look up to because he's my older brother. And, when he said that, he was like, it hit me. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm just meant to tell my story and to make sure that everybody knows you're not alone. Like, we're all in this together. Like, something that's happening to you is happening to millions of people at the same time.
Yeah. And hearing that you started therapy from a place of, I can't cry in front of my psychiatrist, who obviously sees people cry all the time and is probably totally unfazed by emotions. And if you feel guarded about your emotions in that context, that's a big journey, evolution, one could say, to the point of like being able to share something so vulnerable and so emotional on stage. What did it feel like to be that open in front of that many people?
It felt awesome. It just felt awesome. I saw Hannah Gadsby's special, and when I saw her do that, I was like, oh, it can be done in that way. So she, because I had always thought, like, I want to have something to say, something that is going to help people and also make them laugh, like I want to always do that. But there's more, there's other ways and more clever ways to go about handling a stand-up special, or having the privilege to even make a stand-up special. And so sharing that on stage was very liberating, and also people's reactions when I did like 20 shows leading up to my special to warm up the set, because I hadn't done it in 6 months because of COVID. So I was on the East Coast doing comedy clubs in Rhode Island and New Jersey, like, 30% capacity, performing in front of 100 people, which is is an adjustment after performing in front of thousands. You're like, okay, this is what I'm dealing with now. And then to really, show it all was liberating. And I knew, when you're telling the truth, there's always a reward.
That's a great statement. I feel like I'm going to write that down somewhere.
Let me write that down. Hold on one second.
I need to remember when you're telling the truth. There's always a reward. So in terms of workshopping it, like I'm thinking back to like the first night you got up on stage and you've got this material and you're going to talk about this stuff. What are you feeling? I've never done stand-up in such an organized way. I've never really I abused my position. I would be shit-faced or drunk on tour, or, not remember the second show, or go out of order, but just fill an hour. Couldn't wait to get off stage. And this was like, there's a story from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is how it goes. So I had never been that methodical about it. And I had never been that devoted to like my work. But if I was going to come back to stand up, I was going to do it with a bang and be like, hey, listen up. This is what's happening here. So it just felt so right, and I can't say it enough. When you're being real, it always feels right. It just feels like whatever you're getting across is being received in that same way, because you're not faking anything. Mm-hmm.
And it was nice to also do stand up, like, not drunk. Like, I did that for so many years when I was so exhausted all the time doing Chelsea Lately, and then going on tour and, doing 5 shows a week and then 3 shows on the weekend, or 4 shows on the weekend, that I never was in each moment really. It was always just like a clusterfuck of events. And now I'm able to do each project, and focus on one thing at a time. It raises the integrity of the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can feel, it does actually really feel, it does feel very focused. That's really accurate way of describing it from the viewer's perspective too. When you talked about it after, do you feel like you sort of like, has your experience of grief and of your own sort of inner journey, like, taken a step because you brought this stuff out into the open? Like, do you feel different in other parts of your life too?
Yeah, I'm just back to being a bitch again now that I've uncovered it. I'm like, okay, that's the reason I'm a bitch. Now I'm going to be a bitch. Yeah, no, I think everything's cyclical. I think you go through phases. I wanted to film it during COVID also, because I wanted it I wanted to close that chapter. Like now I'm back into stand up. I fucking love it, which is something I never thought I'd say. I thought I was done with stand up, but that's me. You know, I get very impulsive and I'm like, I'm not doing that again. I'm done. I don't want to do the show. I don't want to do this. You know, I quit things before they quit me is what I've always done. So it was a risk because I didn't know, oh, is the audience going to be there for me in the way that they were before when I was on television every night? Or are people going to show up for me in that way? Do I even have ardent fans? You know, there's a whole segment of insecurity and self-consciousness that goes along with doing anything different. But I've learned to lean into that, you know, discomfort and know that like, okay, you know, like just be focused, just know what you're doing, always, you know, sharpen the jokes, always add on, always look at your material. And it was nice to be that focused. You know, it was something I hadn't experienced before in my life professionally. I was just always thought I was Superwoman. I'm like, yeah, I could do that, and then fly home at Thursday at 3 a.m. and tape my show at 11. Like I really just pushed, you know, and burned the candle so much that I really needed to take a step back and be like, who am I and what am I doing? Like, what am I doing with my career? What am I doing with my personal life? And what is going to make me, you know, what do I want to share?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. What's your experience of fear and imposter syndrome? Like you're mentioning, saying that like you're wondering how your fans will receive you after time away. You seem very fearless. That would be my impression of you from sitting, you know, here in my living room. Is that's not accurate though? Or is that, how do you feel inside? And what's your experience of that kind of, you know, performer's insecurity or like artist insecurity?
I'm not a fearful person. I don't, you know, when people say that you're fearless, it's like, well, first you have to have the fear to be fearless. You know, I'm missing that. Just like I have a problem with empathy. Like I'm missing that gene too. There's some things that are just not easy for me to connect with, but I definitely have insecurity and I'm self-conscious. But again, I am just very eager to always share the latest. You know, my desire to share with the world is always paramount to any fear or misgivings I may have. So I always want to share and be like, hey, did you see what I saw? You know, it's kind of like gossiping about myself.
That's such a funny way to put it. Were you like that as a kid too? Like, where do you feel like that impulse came from?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always just want to, you know, sometimes we're not that great. You know, sometimes we get down with, sometimes the only way to relate to people is by sharing negative things about other people. And sometimes, you know, it's better just to share with each other about each other. And sometimes it's just better to share with yourself and not create the idea that I'm covering anything up. To not let people know, you know, if anything, people know that I'm telling them the truth of what's happening to me. You know, I'm not full of shit and I've never been. And I don't have that either. So that, you know, that is just really I think that is the meaning behind it. It's not necessary. I wish I could say, oh God, I'm scared of everything. But when I am scared of something, I'm more drawn to it. That's for sure. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be fearful. I don't like this feeling. So let me get over it. So, you know, putting it out there for everybody, you know, when I was saying, you know, worried about people showing up, it was like I was doing stand-up gigs out of nowhere. You know, I said, book a bunch of theaters and let's see what happens. Like, will I have that base left? Or I haven't been on TV. Does it change? You know, and the idea that I had to kind of reintroduce myself to the stand-up world was, hey, humbling and necessary. Like I needed to get my ego in check because my ego's always never been a problem. That's always been like, oh, you're fucking amazing. Well, that's never been my issue, but it was about humbling myself and doing the groundwork and actually going out and doing those shows. And even throwing up theater dates is a privileged way to go out and do stand-up. You know, not everybody can do that, but I did whatever I had to do to get myself back in the right space and to not desert stand-up.
Mm-hmm. When you're workshopping material, you said that for this show you were more methodical than usual. What's your usual approach? Do you find you write things down? Is it through talking? Is it through performing? Like, where does your material take shape?
Well, I did a book tour for my last book, Life Will Be the Death of Me. It came out like last year sometime. And so I did a book tour and I had different celebrities interview me in each city for this 20-city book tour. And as I was going through the book tour and somebody was moderating a conversation with me in front of, in some theater setting, I was like, these stories that I'm telling are stand-up stories. Like, this is something that I could turn into a special. This is something that I should be doing on stage alone. And so after those 20 dates is when I started doing the stand-up. So it was that kind of evolution. So I basically used my interviewers to come up with the material.
Oh, that's amazing. Nice.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, have you been doing a lot of stuff over Zoom a lot? Like, do you have meetings over Zoom? Are you like hanging out with your friends over Zoom?
Yeah, I mean, I have meetings on, I don't hang out with my friends over Zoom. No, I don't do that. But I do have meetings over Zoom. And I like the idea that now we're in a place where, like, you know, there's so little action in the beginning of COVID. And then the Zoom started happening. And then all of a sudden I'd be like, you know, I'd wake up and I'd see on my calendar that I had 2 Zooms, and I'm like so pissed. I'm like, fuck, you know, I don't want to do a fucking Zoom. Meanwhile, there's nothing happening. Like, there's nothing else happening. It's the only opportunity I have to like do some business. And I was still just like, oh, I fucking hope nothing's on my calendar today. I take a lot of, like, I could easily be a recluse and live in my bedroom for like 3 to 4 weeks. So, you know, it's good for me to get out.
Right. Have you been social distancing really intensely, or are you sort of still hanging out with people? Like, not that you have to, like, you know.
I have a group of people that I see on a regular basis. Like, I do Friday night dinners at one girlfriend's. I see people, I go to restaurants, you know. Now, because the infection rate is really low in LA, I'm less paranoid to be here. But I just stayed on the East Coast for like 3 months during the height of here. So I wasn't, it was just, for my mind, I needed to be in an environment, you know, where the COVID wasn't all encompassing. And even though it's all encompassing for the whole country, I went to Maine, I went on a bunch of white vacations.
That's funny. You talk a lot about cannabis in this special, and you're working on a cannabis line. Do you want to talk a little bit about what cannabis does for you and why you're moving forward in this way to like release your own line?
Yeah, the cannabis is like a game changer. I mean, now that there's an educative component to cannabis so that you don't take an edible and, you know, 8 hours later you're on a plane and you have no idea where you're headed. Like, cannabis now is labeled. It's like, oh, it's microdosing. And the microdosing is the exact thing just to take the edge off, to sand down the edges. You know, after Trump's election, I was walking into Fox News lounges going off on Republicans. I was like, you fucking racist! You voted for him! Like, I was that high. Like, my outrage was at like an 11. And I had to bring it down. And I was trying to meditate. I was going to therapy. I thought it was all about Donald Trump. You know, my anger is not about Donald Trump. Obviously, I can't stand that fucking asshole. But it wasn't about that. It was about something much deeper. So, which, you know, I reveal in the special. But the cannabis just was a game changer for me. It helped me turn the fucking news off, stop watching it like a 24-hour spin cycle, which is what it is. It helped me meditate. It was like my gateway drug to meditation. And it helps you just be around annoying people that would normally annoy me, that now I can just go, oh, if I have a meeting with a certain group of people, I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to take a chocolate covered blueberry. If I have like an event I have to go to that is going to be, you know, fun. I mean, I'm 45 now, so the drinking, like, you know, has to be curbed to a degree. Can't just be bloated now. It's not the same thing. You know, if I drink now, my face looks different the next day. So it's like, oh God, you know, I'm transitioning into an elderly woman. But the cannabis has been such a game changer for my life. It's just made me so much easier and mellow to be around and to not insert myself into conversations just because I have an opinion. It's like just taken me, you know, that in conjunction with some self-awareness that I got from my psychiatrist about my behavior, it was just it was a life changer. And I think so many people I've given, you know, I'm like the same way I am with pharmaceuticals, I am with weed. And so I'm constantly giving my friends, my family, my friends' parents. It's illegal to mail weed, but I do it. And I mail it to people all over the world because it is, you know, whether you have anxiety or you have trouble sleeping or you're, you know, or you need a little boost of creativity, there's something for everybody. So I'm very passionate about cannabis. Yeah, it's definitely, there's a renaissance happening and I am at front and center.
That's amazing. So what do you think is going to happen for the 2020 election? What are your predictions? Do you feel comfortable predicting something?
No, of course not. But I mean, I'm optimistic that this will be a landslide. I think people are done. We've already had 7 million people vote, which is unheard of at this time. Mm-hmm. And the more the people that vote in this country, the more likely Democrats are to win. You know, we're being ruled by minority. We're being ruled by people who are suppressing votes from college students, from Black and brown people. You know, they're making it more, their party's platform, and it's not a secret, is to prevent more people from voting. And when people hear that and you're loud about that, they're gonna vote, and they're gonna make sure their voices are heard. And there are a lot of Trump supporters out there, and you're despicable at this point, because there's no reason. You cannot divorce yourself from white supremacy. If you are voting for him, you are voting for white supremacy.
Yeah, that's really true. Do you have any message to people who are sort of on the fence coming up for this election, like who aren't sort of not sure, they haven't really like absorbed maybe some of the like underlying emotional stakes that are behind what seems like a political decision? Do you have anything you'd like to say to those people?
I would just say to really check your news sources. You know, don't believe things that you read. Check the news source. Is it from the New York Times? Is it from the Wall Street Journal? Is it from the Washington Post? Not some Facebook QAnon group, you know, not some like, and Facebook is, you know, the biggest platform for misinformation. And it's like people are getting their opinions handed to them instead of using critical thinking about what is actually happening in this world, you know? And the message is there's no excuse to vote for Donald Trump. Are you going to say in 20 years to your kids or your grandchildren that you voted for him not once, but twice? Are you going to say that? Are you going to be comfortable saying that to this man who has destructed every entire institution that we have in this country? The FBI, the National Institute for Health, doctors, scientists. It's like, what side of history do you want to be on? Not his.
Totally. I totally agree. Speaking of Facebook, do you use Facebook? Do famous people use social media platforms? Like, do you have a fake Facebook platform that you just are friends with your real friends on?
No, I have
Really?
a Chelsea Handler. I mean, I'm sure I do, but I don't use it. I have a professional page, and then of course Instagram is Facebook, so I guess I use it in that way. But no, I'm not on Facebook. I don't go on Facebook at all.
Right. That's good. I think that's a very good choice. I salute you
No,
for
I'm
that
a
one.
Twitter and Instagram are my two faves.
Yeah. Do you find yourself really addicted to social media, or is it easy for you to step away?
I have to make myself, you know, like I have to go sit and like sit in a room and put my phone in my bedroom, go read a book for 2 hours. And I have to, because how many times a day do you mindlessly go like this? Ugh. And then all of a sudden you look down and you're like, how did I get on Instagram? What am I doing? It's so mindless. And The Social Dilemma, that film, talks about that a lot. So that's pretty cool. I mean, not cool, but they break it down for you, you know, how bad it is and how addictive it is. So yeah, I noticed that. I was on a family vacation with my family this summer. And I mean, I wrote a letter after to my entire family. And I was like, first of all, adults and children, put your fucking phone down for an hour for dinner. Put your fucking phone away. I'm like, we are on vacation in the middle of a pandemic for 2 weeks. We get to spend time together. And you're sitting here on fucking Instagram? Like, no. So I have high judgment. You know, I get very irritated with people who can't put their phones away, because I don't pick my phone up during dinner or during, you know, socializing unless something's wrong. But I don't do that. And we all should stop doing it. You know, our brains are melting.
Yeah, it's so hard. Speaking of your family, have you shown them the special yet? Have they seen it?
No. They can watch it when it comes out on HBO Max. No, I don't need any feedback until it comes out. You know what I mean? Too many cooks in the kitchen.
How do you feel about them seeing it?
I think they know, because I was on that kind of like trajectory when I was doing my book tour. I was getting into personal stories and my therapy stories, and I think they knew where it was going. And I think, though, you know, I think they're going to feel the same way that you described, you know, that they're, you know, I am their sister. So for them, it's like, whoa, but it's a real come to Jesus. You know what I mean? In a sense, not that I believe in Jesus, but it is a real full circle. And I think it's really helpful to people to understand why they act a certain way, you know, why I was acting like such a cunt for so long, and why I had such anger, you know, where did that come from? It's really the best use of, like, the best kind of transaction, you know, to pay somebody to tell you what's wrong with you.
Yeah. If you were to say in a nutshell, like, what does your psychiatrist give you? if you could like really sum it up in a really pithy way, like what are you getting from that relationship?
I think self-awareness. You get self-awareness. You're like, oh, I didn't have any idea how I came across. Like, I thought everyone knew all of me, not just the part that you're presenting. So to understand, like, I thought, oh, well, I'm just telling the truth. It's like, well, that's not always necessary. Like, you don't have to tell everybody the truth about them. You don't have to be so opinionated about everything. And, that was the biggest gift. The gift of self-awareness makes you think about what you're going to say. And, then there's that there's that like part where you're overcorrecting your behavior. So you kind of lose your personality because you're trying to be somebody who's more aware, more conscientious. And then you're like, well, wait, I need some of the old me back in here because I still want to be funny and I want to have edge. That's what makes me who I am.
What did you do when you overcorrected? What were you like when you were overcorrecting from?
I think I was just getting so stoned all the time because I was like, this keeps me quiet. So I would go to like social functions, and finally my friend Mary was like, okay, you're too stoned now. Like, this is a little bit too much of an overcorrection. And that's my pattern of behavior. I'm always like, oh, okay. And then she's like, you can't go from not having any self-consciousness to being this self-conscious. So you kind of have to merge what you've learned with who you are.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like you're really, I mean, I don't know you personally, but I feel like watching evolution of like different things that you've done over the years, it seems like very public that you're doing that. And it's really interesting to watch. Like there's sort of a meta level happening watching your material, because it's like, okay, here's the material. And then also there's this like life cycle of a Chelsea that we're also getting to be privy to, which is amazing. And I'm really happy that you're sharing that with the world.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. So this special, it's called Evolution. It's going to premiere on HBO Max on October the 22nd. The conversation that you just watched here tonight is going to be live on the JFL site for a couple more days, so you can tell your friends to come back and watch it if they haven't had a chance to tonight. Chelsea, what a delight to talk to you. You're fucking awesome. It's so great to sit down with you. And I really, truly mean what I'm going to say. Thank you for the personal and vulnerable side of yourself that you're sharing with the world in this special.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you and to hang out with you for 45 minutes or however long we've been on.
Great to meet you too. Thanks so much, Chelsea. Have a great night. I'm Nicole Stamp, and that is Chelsea Handler.
Sabrina again, that's the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can read all about Chelsea's chosen charity on her show page. Please go check out all the other amazing shows out there. There are 3 different rooms. Each of them have their own different programming, and they're all available on demand until Sunday night. Loads of comedy to enjoy at your leisure. I'm Sabrina, and I'm about to take a big old bath.